And look, as I pointed out before, Trump is just the gravity. Like I look at my videos, and it's like one video after the next is about Trump. It's about different factions in that sense, but you're stuck with it because he's the political gravity, especially on this particular issue. There's something I want to highlight, as I pointed out, and I can cut this as a specific video. So Trump coming out and saying this, and as I pointed out to Arno, I think it's a big deal. I don't think it's trivial. So, of course, he makes the mineral deal. All right. And so you get comments like this. They point out, hey, what is Ukraine getting for this? Trump comes out and says this. I want to piggyback this comment on another comment that he made, because I think the politics that is being played here is actually far more sophisticated than I think we typically give Donald Trump credit for. And no, this is not me simping for Trump. I just think the politics works very well. I would say the same thing about Boris Johnson when he was running against Jeremy Corbyn, and he beat the stuffing out of Jeremy Corbyn, despite the fact that I love Jeremy Corbyn. This is Trump.
With Ukraine and this mineral deal, what does Ukraine get in return, Mr. President?
$350 billion and lots of equipment, military equipment, and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time. In fact, I was the one that gave the javelins. You remember the famous javelins? That was me. That wasn't Obama. It wasn't Biden. It wasn't anybody else. It was me. And they wiped out a lot of tanks with those javelins. And the expression was that Obama gave sheets and I gave the javelins. That was a big deal at the time. It wiped out. That was the beginning when people said, wow, that's something. Well,
that wasn't the beginning. 2014 was the beginning. And you probably could go back further than that. Trump is making this argument, and I guess he's making two arguments at once. And the first, he's pointing out, look, what they're getting out of it is the fact that we've given them hundreds of billions of dollars. That's what they're getting out of it. Now, his language is imprecise because he's not saying what they will get. He's talking about what we gave them. So his argument is we gave them $350 billion. I don't know if that number is exactly right, but whatever. It may be more, maybe less. But that's his case. We already gave them that. So we are recouping what we gave them. That's his framing. All right. Then he says, well, I'm the one that gave him javelins. Yeah, because if you remember at the time, they were going after Trump saying that he was a Putin plant and that he was a Manchurian candidate. And as a Manchurian candidate was effectively working for the Russians. And so anything that Donald Trump did under that context was folded under this notion that Donald Trump had an alliance with Putin. Putin got him elected. And because of that, Trump was a plant to Putin. Now, this is fantastic because, you know, you get $100 million from Miriam Adelson and nobody cares. Meaning they're using this case as if Trump is somehow working with the Russians. And yet they don't make the case that Trump is simping for Israel when he gets $100 million from Miriam Adelson in order to expel Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank. I'm just saying, it is wild to me that one with zero evidence gets ran with, and the other, with all the evidence in the world, gets fundamentally ignored. Astonishing to me, but let's keep going. Then, at another point, Trump says this. Listen to what he says here, because the language is very important.
And the javelins are the things that knocked out those tanks right at the beginning.
Is President Putin distinct in any way?
He's a very smart guy. He's a very cunning person. But I've dealt with some really bad people. But I will tell you, as far as this is concerned, you have to understand, he had no intention, in my opinion, of settling this war. I think he wanted the whole thing. When I got elected, we spoke, and I think we're going to have a deal. I can't guarantee that. You know, a deal is a deal. Lots of crazy things happen in deals, right? But I think we're going to have a deal. If I didn't get elected, I believe he would have just continued to go through Ukraine, and over a period of time, A lot of people would have been killed. Would have lasted for a period of time.
A lot of people have already been killed. We're talking about nearly 1 million people that have been wiped off the face of the earth as a result of this war. It is a modern war in every sense of the word. It is drone warfare, tanks, planes, missiles, Orezhnik, for God's sake. These things are terrifying. It's a modern war. Europe and the US under Joe Biden made this argument that Putin wanted to take it all. He wanted to go through Ukraine. He wanted to go into Europe. He wanted to take it all. That was their framing. That was their argument. If we allow him to do this here, he is going to go through all of Europe. Now, this argument was always nonsense. Putin went into Ukraine with 150,000 people. That 150,000 people was enough to take territory. It was not enough to hold territory and to continue, which is the reason why Russia eventually pulled back in order to get their forces up to snuff in order to press and continue where they were going. It is a Western framing that Putin wanted it all. Initially, before the war started, and you got the William Burns memo, it was clear that Russia did not want to get involved into a conflict. Wars are always challenging to the state. Even though it's the fullest expression of power of the state, it's still challenging to the state, especially if the war goes poorly. There's no way for you to completely predict that. There's no way to predict what NATO was going to do. There's no way to predict whether or not the U.S. was going to take a particular action that would have driven this country or all the world into a hellscape. And so those things are unpredictable in a way that you don't necessarily want to get involved in unless you need to get involved in. This was taking place on their border. It was the expansion of NATO. NATO is a hostile military organization. We're talking about us overthrowing the government of Iraq. We're talking about going into Yugoslavia, meaning this is not like the countries that are involved are just dandelions standing there. They have an active history of overthrowing governments. And so if you're Russia and you're seeing this on your border, you will take issue. I'm trying to point out, though, that Trump has started to use a Western framing in an argument to end it as a face-saving mechanism. So as opposed to the reality of it, of this take place on their border, this was a red line, Russia got involved in order to say no. They didn't want it all. They weren't even involved, interested in going into Ukraine in the first place. They were provoked in doing so. Meaning, if you've noticed, they've removed the language of unprovoked war of aggression. And even in the UN resolutions, they've been more neutral in the way that they've talked about the conflict, saying it's complicated. All right, fair enough. If the West decided that Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine, whether Trump believes it or not is irrelevant. It is brilliant when people say, what are you going to get out of this, Trump? Because oftentimes, as you've heard the media ask them, what is Putin going to have to give? What is Putin going to have to give? What does Putin have to give in order to make this work? The reason why they say that is because they know that Trump is going to need something to hold on to say, this is what I got. We negotiated. The war is over with. And this is what I got out of it from Russia. These are the concessions that I got out of it from Russia in order to end the conflict. Okay, well, if you're saying that one of your main concessions is that Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine, and that because I, Donald Trump, am in office, and I, Donald Trump, pushed for a deal, and Putin wouldn't dare cross me because I am Donald Trump, and this is the deal I was able to get, and that deal is all of Ukraine is not going to be taken. That is effectively a fart in a jar. That's what it is. It's a fart in a jar. Because the Russian position was not to take all of Ukraine. And because the Russian position was not to take all of Ukraine, Trump could live in the space of, well, this is what they wanted. Well, under this guise, Putin didn't give anything in real terms because that wasn't his objective in the first place. And because he didn't have to give anything and that wasn't his objective, that doesn't stop Trump from still selling it as if it was his objective, and that what he got out of it was to prevent all of Ukraine from being taken. It is brilliant politics in the way that it's being used, whether Trump knows it and believes it, or whether he's using it as a political face-saving mechanism. It's fascinating. And it works. It works because that was Europe's argument. That was America's argument. Trump is just folding himself within the context of that argument. Whether Europe believes it or not, whether doesn't matter. That is what he can hold on to and say, this is what I got. Because that is the argument that had been made to the American public and to the European publics for the last 3 years. It's fascinating.